indirectly, that's what you're trying to do through the food and all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much.
But just finding what feels, where do you feel called to fast in that carbon way? We can't approach Lent from this sense of it's a burden.
Yeah, okay, exactly.
Because then we don't experience the abundance, right? If we can do it in a way that feels joyful, then Lent is a gift to us, not a burden.
Yeah. So do you have in your memory, in your experience, that people are doing this fast, this kind of fast? Because I assume that Methodists, all those who follow this faith, this tradition, are they doing a similar kind of thing, or everybody has their own? Like if I talk to another Methodist, would they tell me different fasts?
I mean, so I think a lot of it depends on the pastor of your church too. So I went to seminary, and I'm actually in the process of being ordained right now myself as a deacon in the Methodist Church. And so I probably, so that
isn't that a big deal?
It is a big deal. Thank you.
So you will be a deacon. I have heard about deacons. I have
Deacons have a ministry that's in the world that bridges the church and the world versus having a church that you're pastoring a congregation.
So maybe we can have another interview with her when she's done ordained and then, oh, wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Right, the reason
can I congratulate?
Well, sure. Yes.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank
okay.
you.
I'll let you.
Well, the reason I mention it is that I was raised in a pastoring family with many generations of pastors. So I think my approach to it has always been a leadership approach where I'm very interested in it, and I talk with my family about it, and I take a lot of initiative about Lent. Some people might be less like that, and they'd be more inclined to say, well, what's my church family doing? What is my pastor talking about during Lent? And often there will be a Lenten Bible study or a book Bible study where you read a book and you talk about that. And there will be a way that the church observes Lent together. And the church might say, hey, how about if we all do this carbon fast together for Lent? Or the church might say, let's do something else together. What should we do? So when you ask different Methodists, some of them may have their own thing that they did growing up that they love doing during Lent, and others may just have a church family that they are very involved in, and they do something together every year. So you'll definitely hear different things depending on who you talk to. And of course, if you talk to pastors versus lay people, then you'll hear different things too. Okay. And I'm in this interesting kind of in-between place.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's nice. Yeah. So in your ministry, you will be teaching about fasting as well? Like, do you encourage people to fast?
Well, so as I mentioned, there's in Methodism, the concept of fasting is also related to the concept of abstaining from things.
Okay.
And for me, this is a sense of abundance. So my work definitely addresses the ideas of scarcity and abundance, which, as I said, are at the heart of fasting for me. And fear is at the root of a sense of scarcity. Fasting and abstaining help us heal that fear. And so fear isn't always bad. Sometimes it can help us and protect us, but it can be over amplified and it can haunt us. And that can lead to aggression and anger and depression and all kinds of other things. And so sometimes we can heal our fear by just learning to see a situation differently through a lens of abundance. So one example of that in my work is a lot of us have a sense of lament about climate change. Why were we born in this time of climate change? Why didn't the people who came before us do more and do it sooner? And that's all valid. There's so much suffering and destruction around climate change, and there's a lot to lament. There's also another way to look at it, which is we get to be alive in this moment. What if it's really an important time for us to be alive? And what if this is a turning point? And no matter what happens in the future, it's our privilege that we get to be a part of it and to strive together for the healing of all the creation. And that's an abundant way to look at our climate moment.
Hmm.
So in my work, I don't recommend, I probably might not use the word fast for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but when we talk about taking on new habits or new practices in order to help be a part of the healing of the creation, then instead of seeing it as this burden that we bear and a lack and a time of just lament, we can also see it as a time of great, joyful
Hmm.
opportunity, privilege, and
Hmm.
connection.
Yeah. All right. Do you find any similarities in this practice with the Islamic ways? Are you familiar in any form or shape? If you're not, that's fine. If you are, have you found
Um,
anything?
well, so I'm a little bit familiar. My younger sister lived in Senegal for over a year, and that was the first time that I really became familiar with the concept of Ramadan, and the fasting, the Islamic fasting of Ramadan. Um, and I think that there are, in some branches of Christianity, then people have a very, like in Catholicism, there's a very standard way that everybody does the fast during Lent.
Mhm.
And, um, but not all branches of Christianity even observe Lent.
Mhm.
And yet there is this sense of Sundays as being a Sabbath day or a day of rest. It's actually kind of interesting. Sabbath means seven, and it came from the Hebrew word for seven because God rested on the seventh day after creating the universe. And so the Jewish day of rest is Saturday, which is the seventh day of the week. But Jesus, who was Jewish, after in the narratives about his death and resurrection, he also rests on the Sabbath, which is Saturday. And that's why he's resurrected on Sunday, because as a Jew, he would not have, it wouldn't have made sense for him to rise on the first day, on the seventh day of the week. But because of that, and because Christians celebrate that day, the resurrection day, Sunday became the Sabbath, and Sabbath came to mean a day of rest rather than the word, seven and the seventh day. It's the first day of the week, which
Mm.
actually nowadays a lot of people don't even know because people think Monday's the first day of the week because we're so focused on weekends. But the point is that uh, pretty much every Christian that I know sees Sunday as a day of rest. And there are certain things that you just try not to do on Sundays. Like you try not to work, and you try, if you have a job where you have to work, then you're like sad about that. And you maybe try to find another day of rest and take your day of rest a different day and kind of make up for that fast, right? And there's this sense of how important it is to have cycles of work and cycles of rest. And I remember when I visited Northern Ireland, you weren't even allowed to garden on Sundays. Like people would be offended if they saw you out gardening on a Sunday. Whereas here, people think of gardening as like a restful recreational activity that you get to do
Mm.
on Sunday. But
Isn't that
so
interesting?
it's a little different what people mean by that day of rest. But everybody sort of has that sense of a kind of fast or abstinence of certain kinds of work on Sunday. That's, I would say it's pretty universal in Christianity. I mean, it is diverse, and I'm sure there are ways that it's really different, but I know that Islam is much more uniform in the way that fasting is practiced. And obviously, that's just not true in Christianity. There's a lot of branches and it's very diverse.
Mm. Mm.
Um, but I do think that um, I do think that these ideas are about there being something that's bigger than we are, that connects us, and that we are serving. We're serving a vision that's bigger than we are. And these ideas of fasting as part of our spiritual tradition help us get out of the idolatry of the self, that we're at the center of the universe and that we should do the things that we want to do when we want to do them. And fasting, I don't want to speak for Islam, but my sense of fasting among all religious traditions is that it always helps us with that, getting out of that
Mm.
self-centeredness that we can fall into. and into a sense of centering of something bigger and more important than we are, that
So
we're a part of, but we're not the center of.
True. So it seems like in fasting traditions, Islam seems to be then the most, the one after you said that, it is breaking away more from that idolatry of yourself, because it's the most disciplined and it's very uniform and everybody does it the same way all over the world.
Well, and my understanding of Islam is that there's a lot of focus on the idea of submitting to the divine.
Yeah.
Submission. And so I can see that being a really important part of letting go of the idolatry of the self and submitting to the divine.
Yeah. And we will talk about submission also more. What does it really mean to submit? Okay.
Yeah. Because of course that's an English word too.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. But it gives a different sense in English rather than what it inculcates a huge part in that. Okay, good. So any message of your fasting that you think that people should know, that you really revere or you love it or you think we can learn from?
I mean, I'm just going to say what I said again, because the important thing for me about fasting is that we approach it joyfully. And that doesn't mean that it's not a time of reflection and contemplation and simplicity. It just means that, isn't it amazing that our lives are so abundant that we can fast from things?
Yeah.
What an amazing gift that we can fast. And if we approach it with a sense of scarcity and dragging our feet and we feel like it's punishment, it's much harder for us to feel the healing that fasting offers us.
Very nicely said. Thank you so much. That's all right. So anything else you want to say before we move to the last leg of questions?
I'm just really glad you're doing this series on fasting. It's so important and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Thank you. All right.